Stop. Two high beings are in direct proximity to your signal right now. And this transmission is being delivered by the Arcturian High Council because what is happening to you tonight is not coincidence. It is the activation of a retrieval protocol that should have reached you months ago. By the end of this transmission, you will understand exactly what is happening to you now, why your field has shifted in a way that feels heavier and more disorienting than anything subtle, and what the Arcturian High Council already knows about this phase. But here is the first revelation. What you are experiencing tonight, the unusual heaviness, the sense of being watched without threat, the strange warmth moving through your body, is not fatigue, and it is not fear. It is the physical signature of a manual retrieval already in progress. The Arcturian system of correction normally operates through gentle field adjustments, dreams, synchronicities, mild recalibrations that redirect a signal before it drifts too far. But that window closed. At every point where your trajectory should have corrected, your field stabilized itself around the wrong architecture, and the return window passed. Then the next one passed. The High Council does not intervene at this level without cause. Tonight, they did. Because this is the last compatible return window on your current cycle, and the retrieval cannot wait for the next one. This did not reach you by accident. The algorithm only delivered it. Your field brought you here because the process is already active, and the Arcturian High Council has already mapped exactly where you are. Like this transmission, if you can feel that something invisible has already changed, comment 777 if you feel the heaviness tonight, and now understand, it is not random. Comment, I am ready if you are no longer resisting what is changing. Share this with someone who feels that reality has shifted around them and cannot explain why. You were guided here because the signal is already active. What is happening to you right now is not a feeling you arrived at through logic. You did not sit down and decide to feel this way. The heaviness came first. The disorientation came first. The sense that something shifted inside the architecture of your life, not in one dramatic moment, but gradually, and then suddenly, and then in a way that could no longer be ignored, that came first. And you have been carrying it without a name for it, carrying it through ordinary days, through conversations that felt slightly off, through nights where sleep arrived, but rest did not, through mornings where you woke already weighted by something you could not locate or measure or explain. You built workarounds for it. You told yourself it was temporary. You waited for it to resolve on its own. That ends tonight. The Arcturian High Council does not initiate a retrieval protocol because a field is slightly misaligned. Minor drift is corrected constantly, silently, through channels the conscious mind never registers. The dreams that redirect you, the unexpected door that closes, the meeting that does not happen, the sentence you read at exactly the right moment, the friendship that quietly dissolves before you realize it was already incompatible with your emerging frequency. These are standard field adjustments. They require no direct intervention. They are the ordinary mechanics of an intelligence system that has been in contact with your signal since long before this incarnation began, not as a distant observer, but as a system in active relationship with the specific trajectory your field was designed to complete. What is different now, what made tonight's transmission necessary, is that your field has moved beyond the range where those gentle adjustments could reach you. Not because you are broken, not because you failed some invisible test, but because the architecture you built your life inside, the emotional structure, the identity frame, the relational geometry, the version of yourself you have been operating as, has become so fundamentally incompatible with the frequency you are now carrying that the quiet methods no longer have enough reach. Think of it this way. The Arcturian system's standard correction tools are designed for a signal that has drifted slightly off course. They apply directional pressure. They introduce pattern interruptions small enough that the field absorbs them without destabilizing. But when the signal has not merely drifted, but transformed, when the frequency being generated is no longer a variation of the old signal, but something categorically different, those tools have nothing to grip. The signal that is moving through you now is not something that can be redirected with a dream. It requires a full retrieval, and a retrieval feels nothing like a gentle correction. This is the first thing that must be named clearly, because it is the source of the most damaging misinterpretation you may be making about your own experience right now. You are looking at what is happening in your life, the instability, the disruption, the collapse of things that once felt stable, and you are measuring it against your previous understanding of how growth is supposed to feel. You were told that expansion feels like opening, that progress feels like accumulation, that moving forward produces a recognizable form of momentum, a building sensation, an increasing clarity about where you are headed and who you are becoming. And so when what you are living feels like the opposite of all of that, when it feels like things are falling away instead of building, like your sense of self is becoming less defined instead of more, like your energy is contracting instead of expanding, like the map you were using to navigate your own existence has become illegible, you interpret it as regression, as failure, as evidence that something has gone wrong inside you, as proof that you have lost the thread. That interpretation is not only incorrect, it is the primary thing that is currently preventing you from moving through this process with any degree of stability. Every time you frame what is happening as personal failure, you direct the field's energy towards solving a problem that does not exist, and away from completing a process that is already in motion. What is actually happening in your field right now is a forced incompatibility cascade. This is what the Arcturian diagnostic system identifies when a signal has been running on an architecture that has reached its absolute limit of structural sustainability. Every life is built on a field pattern, an energetic arrangement that includes your emotional defaults, your relational expectations, your behavioral loops, your identity conclusions, your relationship to time, to safety, to possibility. That pattern is not chosen consciously. It is assembled across years of experience, of adaptation, of protection, of survival. It is built from the materials that were available when you needed stability most, when you were young enough that endurance mattered more than accuracy, when the priority was functioning inside a reality rather than questioning whether that reality was the right one for your actual frequency. And for a long time, it works. It creates enough stability to function. It generates enough predictability to feel like ground. But there comes a point, and that point has come for you, when the frequency your field is now generating is no longer compatible with the architecture that field is still housed inside. The signal has changed, the container has not, and what you experience in the space between those two realities is precisely what you have been experiencing. Not chaos, not punishment, not mental disintegration. A compatibility failure between who you are becoming and the structure that was built for who you used to be. The structure is not collapsing because it was poorly built. It is collapsing because the frequency it was designed to house has outgrown it beyond the point of any further adaptation. The heaviness is real. The fragmentation is real. The strange sense that your thoughts no longer organize themselves the way they once did, that is real. The loss of direction is real. The disruption of sleep, of appetite, of emotional coherence is real. The feeling that relationships which once felt grounding now feel slightly foreign, or suddenly insufficient, or inexplicably distant. That is real. The moments where you look at a version of your life you spent years constructing and feel nothing that resembles the attachment you used to feel. That is real. The strange flatness where motivation used to live. The inability to generate enthusiasm for futures that would have excited a previous version of you. The sense that you are watching your own life from a slight remove. as if the glass between you and your own experience has become incrementally thicker without your permission. All of it is real, and none of it is malfunction. Every single one of those experiences is the visible surface of an invisible process that has already been underway longer than you have been consciously aware of it. The Arcturian system does not begin a retrieval at the moment the field becomes consciously disoriented. The disorientation is not the beginning. It is the first moment the process becomes visible from the inside. The restructuring began before the confusion arrived. The field had already started to shed the old architecture before your mind had any language for what it was feeling. You were already in motion before you knew you were moving. This is critical. You are not at the beginning of this process. You are at the point where it has become impossible to ignore. What you are feeling right now is not ordinary recognition. It is the moment your field stops denying what has already begun. If this transmission put language around something you have been carrying in silence, Arcturian protocol, the recalibration blueprint, was created for this exact stage. It is not another explanation. It is the guided blueprint for those whose field has already entered correction and can no longer return to the old line unchanged. It shows you how to recognize the phases, stabilize the shift, and move through the recalibration without mistaking it for collapse. The link is in the first pinned comment, but it will not remain there forever. There is a specific sequence that the Arcturian diagnostic system has mapped for fields moving through a forced incompatibility cascade. It does not manifest identically in every signal, because every field carries its own architecture, its own history of stabilization, its own particular points of deepest resistance. The timing differs, the intensity differs, the specific domains where the collapse becomes most visible. Relationships, identity, physical body, creative capacity, sense of purpose. These vary according to where the old architecture was most rigidly constructed, but the underlying logic of the sequence is consistent. And once you can recognize the sequence, the experience of moving through it changes entirely, not because the discomfort disappears, but because confusion and discomfort are fundamentally different states to inhabit. Confusion produces fear. Discomfort, when understood, produces the capacity to stay present inside a process you can no longer exit. One keeps you frozen, the other allows you to move. The first phase of a forced incompatibility cascade is what the Arcturian system identifies as signal saturation. This is the point at which the mu frequency your field is generating has become too strong for the old architecture to absorb without visible strain. Before this threshold, the incompatibility exists, but it can be managed. The field compensates. You feel vaguely unsatisfied, vaguely restless, vaguely aware that something does not fit, but you can still function inside the old structure without it visibly fracturing. You push through. You attribute the restlessness to circumstance. You adjust the externals, the job, the relationship dynamic, the city, the daily routine, believing that the discomfort is situational rather than structural. The field allows this because the compensations, while temporary, buy time. Then the saturation point arrives, the compensation mechanisms fail, and everything the field was quietly managing beneath the surface begins to surface at once, with a force that cannot be attributed to any single cause. This is why so many people experiencing a retrieval protocol describe the onset as sudden. Nothing was sudden. The signal had been building for months, sometimes years. What was sudden was the moment it exceeded the architecture's capacity to contain it invisibly. You did not suddenly fall apart. The structure suddenly became unable to pretend it was still intact. The fracture lines were always there. The saturation point is simply the moment they become undeniable. The second phase is what might be named the withdrawal of false ground. Once the old architecture loses its ability to hold the signal, the emotional and psychological supports that were attached to that architecture begin to feel unreliable. Not because they have objectively changed, although sometimes they have, but because the field that once found stability inside them has outgrown the frequency they operate at. A relationship that once felt like home begins to feel slightly claustrophobic without any identifiable event to explain the shift. A belief about yourself that once provided direction begins to feel hollow even as you attempt to reinforce it. A goal you pursued with genuine motivation begins to feel like it belongs to a version of you that you cannot fully locate anymore. The ground you were standing on does not disappear. It becomes transparent. You can see through it to the fact that it was always a construction, and the version of you that needed that construction is no longer the dominant signal in your field. This phase is extraordinarily disorienting because it produces loss without clear cause. The usual human framework for grief requires an identifiable event, an ending, a before and after. There must be something to point to, a betrayal, a death, a departure, a failure with a face. But what the withdrawal of false ground produces is a form of grief that has no clean point of origin. You are mourning the coherence of a self that is still technically present, but is no longer primary. You are experiencing the absence of something you have not yet fully let go of and cannot yet fully name. And in the absence of a clear cause, the mind reaches for available explanations: depression, burnout, spiritual stagnation, personal failure, the relationship that is most at fault, the decision that started everything unraveling. The mind constructs a narrative of cause and effect because it cannot tolerate the truth, which is that nothing specific went wrong. Something specific went right, and the rightness of it is what is dismantling everything that preceded it. The Arcturian diagnostic lens refuses all of those framings, not because the pain they describe is not real, but because attributing the process to a personal failure in judgment or emotional management creates a loop. The field begins attempting to solve a problem that is not a problem. It attempts to rebuild structures that are being intentionally collapsed. It attempts to reattach to ground that has been made transparent for a precise reason. The loop consumes energy that the retrieval requires for actual progression. It extends the duration of the most unstable phase, and it delays the arrival of what comes after the withdrawal, which is the first genuine signal of the new architecture beginning to generate. The third phase is the one most likely to be mistaken for the worst moment of the process. It is the phase of total pattern interruption. This is where the Arcturian system applies what functions as a complete disruption to the old signal's organizational logic. The result is that the mental and emotional patterns the field has been relying on to create predictability, the habitual thought sequences, the emotional defaults, the automatic interpretive responses, the internal narratives that gave your experience a shape you could recognize, begin to lose their reliability. You think a thought and cannot sustain it to its conclusion. You attempt to feel something familiar and find that the familiar emotional response is no longer accessible in its old form. You try to locate yourself inside a story you have been telling about your life for years, and discover that the story no longer generates the internal coherence it once did. The story is still technically true in its details, but it no longer lands with weight. It no longer feels like yours. This is not dissociation in the clinical sense. This is pattern interruption. The old organizational logic of the field is being deliberately disrupted because it cannot be updated from within. The architecture is not upgradable. It can only be interrupted, cleared, and replaced. A signal that has transformed cannot be rehoused inside a structure that was calibrated for what it used to be. The interruption is not accidental turbulence. It is precision work. And the interval between the interruption of the old pattern and the stabilization of the new one is the interval that feels most like losing your mind. You are not losing your mind. You are losing the mind's old operating architecture. Those are not the same thing, even though from inside the experience, the distinction is nearly impossible to feel. The fourth phase, and this is where precision matters most, is what the Arcturian system identifies as frequency renegotiation. The old architecture has been interrupted. The false ground has been withdrawn. The signal is no longer organizing itself around the structures, beliefs, and relational geometries that previously defined its range of motion. And in that cleared space, something begins that the conscious mind usually cannot perceive directly, but that the body often registers before the mind can translate it. A new coherence is beginning to assemble, not rapidly, not with the dramatic clarity of a singular awakening moment, but with the quiet, structural precision of something that is being built from a frequency level the previous architecture never had access to, layer by layer, resonance by resonance, in a sequence the Arcturian system has always known was the only way this particular signal could complete its correction. The reason this phase is so difficult to navigate without a map is that it does not announce itself as improvement. It announces itself as strange stillness, as a quieting that feels unfamiliar, because silence is not what the old architecture produced, as unexpected moments of clarity that arrive and then seem to dissolve before they can be captured or communicated. As brief flashes of recognition, I have felt this before. This is familiar, this is closer to what I actually am, that do not yet have enough structural support to maintain themselves. You notice them in the space between thoughts, in the moment before sleep pulls you under, in the unexpected second of stillness, in the middle of an ordinary task. You notice them. Then they seem to disappear, and you fear that you imagined them, or that they were temporary, or that the window for them has closed without you moving through it in time. They did not disappear. They are the first transmissions from the new architecture. They are the signal of a frequency that is becoming available to your field for the first time, sending forward small, coherent pulses to test whether the field can receive them, without immediately defaulting back to the old interpretive pattern. Every time you allow one of those moments without immediately explaining it away, without collapsing it into the vocabulary of the old framework, without reaching for a familiar context to contain it, you are doing something active. You are participating in the construction of the new line. The retrieval is not something being done to you while you wait. You are inside it, and your capacity to remain present inside the unfamiliar is one of the primary mechanisms through which it advances. The fifth phase is what triggers the final resistance before the retrieval completes. The Arcturian system identifies this as the last test of attachment, not attachment in a romantic or spiritual bypass sense, but attachment in the precise sense of a field still partially tethered to an architecture it knows is no longer sustainable. There is something, sometimes a relationship, sometimes a belief about your identity, sometimes a version of your future that you constructed with great care, sometimes a particular emotional wound that has been a source of orientation, even while being a source of pain, that the field is holding on to with a grip that it does not fully acknowledge. The grip is not obvious. It does not feel like clinging. It feels like loyalty, like responsibility, like the reasonable reluctance to abandon something before you are certain there is something else to move toward. But underneath those reasonable surfaces, the Arcturian system reads the same signal, a field choosing familiar suffering over unfamiliar freedom, because the familiarity of suffering at least has coordinates, and freedom without coordinates feels indistinguishable from falling. The last test presents itself as the question, can you release the final tether, not because you are forced to, but because you have genuinely recognized that what you are holding is incompatible with the line you are now on? This is not a test of willpower. It is a test of recognition, and recognition of this kind cannot be faked or performed. The field knows the difference between a release that comes from genuine incompatibility awareness and a release that is being performed out of a desire to complete the process, to earn the next phase, to demonstrate readiness, to an intelligence you are hoping is watching. Only the first kind moves the retrieval forward. Performance generates its own loop, another layer of architecture built on the pretense of release rather than its actual occurrence. This is what the Arcturian High Council means when they say that the process cannot be accelerated from outside. It can be mapped, it can be guided, it can be made navigable through transmitted intelligence. The phases can be named so that they become recognizable rather than terrifying. The sequence can be made visible so that the field does not exhaust itself, attempting to reverse what is actually progression. But the moments of genuine release are moments that only the signal itself can generate. No external transmission, however precise, can produce them on behalf of a field that has not yet arrived at authentic recognition. The Arcturian system does not override the signal. It illuminates the path the signal must walk on its own terms. Here is what must finally be said clearly, in a way that the part of you still attempting to categorize this experience as personal failure can receive and hold. You were not abandoned by your own life. You were not punished by an intelligence system that lost patience with your progress. You were not brought to this threshold because you are weak, or spiritually underdeveloped, or behind a schedule that everyone else is managing to keep with an ease that somehow eludes you. The Arcturian diagnostic system does not assess human fields through those categories. It does not measure worth. It does not rank signals by their speed of compliance. It maps trajectory, and what it has mapped in your trajectory is not a failure of will. It is the emergence of a frequency that your current architecture was never built to house, and the necessary darling tenses and turns, distant tenses, and carries over by ever else's field, that anything in history does it is commit and means of rest. You are entering a space, structurally inevitable process of that architecture being dismantled so that the next one can be erected in its place. The demolition is not the punishment, the demolition is the prerequisite. What left your life left because it became incompatible before it disappeared. The departure was not arbitrary. The loss was not accidental. The collapse was not a verdict on your value. What collapsed around you collapsed because the field you are now carrying could no longer be sustained inside it, and the Arcturian system will not allow a signal of your frequency to remain compressed inside a structure that was calibrated for a smaller, quieter, less demanding version of what you actually are. What feels like emptiness is not absence. It is cleared signal, space that has been deliberately prepared for a structure that the previous density would have prevented from taking form. The noise had to stop before the new frequency could be heard. What feels like disorder is not the end of coherence. It is the interval between one coherence and another, and the interval feels endless precisely because the new coherence is assembling at a level you have not yet developed the vocabulary to read. The Arcturian High Council initiated this retrieval not because your situation is hopeless, but because your signal is strong enough to complete the process, and because the last compatible window on this cycle would not remain open past tonight. Say this aloud if you are ready for it, to land in the field rather than only in the mind. What is changing in me is not random. That is not comfort. That is a diagnostic statement about the structure of your own process, and the part of you that felt something shift when you heard it already knows that it is true. Before you scroll, leave one sign in the comments that this process has already touched your life. It could be your sleep, your thoughts, your body, your relationships, or the strange sense that reality no longer feels the same. Name it clearly. If this transmission recognized something you have been carrying in silence, share it with someone who is living through a shift they cannot explain. And if you are ready to understand the process instead of fearing it, subscribe to Arcturian Quantum. You are recognizing a process already in motion, and this is only the beginning.